Namaste. So the process I go through to decide what we're talking about each week is that at some point, usually about the middle of the month, I look at the gospel readings that are in the Revised Common Lectionary for the next month. And then I try and come up with what might be a theme from that. And I don't like themes. I've said that before. I hate themes because once you set a theme, you try and push something into this box you've constructed. But when I looked at this particular reading last month, it occurred to me that it seemed to me that what was there was something about people in contemporary society having a hard time knowing when to move on. And so I wrote this little exciting blurb on the meetup.com site that was supposed to bring people flocking in that I can barely see. You may have heard it said of someone, he or she has really come into their own. What does it mean in today's world exactly when more and more young adults are moving back into their parents' home because of the difficult economic times in which we live? There also seem to be both a lack of mentors and a lack of people willing to be mentored. They are making all kinds of mistakes because of their unwillingness to learn from those with more experience. If we are smart enough to be mentored, how do we know when it's time to head out on our own? If we are back under our parents' roof, how do we know when it's time to go? When do we finally stand on our own? How do we avoid overstaying our welcome? And when might it be time to leave everything and everybody we have known behind in order to become our own person? Yeah, it is heavy. And what is it that, if you were sitting at work today and somebody showed up and said, "Follow me," that would lead you to call 911 more often than it would lead you to go, "Oh, okay, let's go." And, especially if they had a couple of Kool-Aid packets hanging out of their pocket. And what is it about, was it something about Jesus that led these people to follow him? Was it that the halo is there just like it is in the paintings?
It wasn't.
No, of course it was, because those are photographs. Was it something about him, or was it something about the people that followed him? What is it that leads us to be willing to be mentored? And as I reflected on that, I think it's that the person who we are willing to have be our mentor has something we would like. A skill, a talent, and that's always a reflection of what the culture values. So, and sometimes, it's always a reflection of what the culture values, and yet there's a breadth in that. If you are a golfer, and you'd like to be a better golfer, you probably want to find a golf pro. There's one that lives next door to us. He's the most unlikely golf pro in the world.
He doesn't get straight.
He must, because of where he works. But he looks like he has to buy his clubs at the kids department.
Maybe he does.
Maybe he does. And yet, if you're looking for a golf mentor, they're fairly easy to find because they have a sign. You just go to the golf club. Go to the golf
mentor.
Right, and you're going to find a golf mentor. But life's greater questions are more challenging. Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan, says that nobody in their 20s knows anything. In fact, nobody in the first half of life knows anything. And I think I can say with some confidence that two things are true. Nobody in this room is in their 20s, and that makes it safe for me to say nobody in their 20s knows anything. But we all thought we did. I mean, when we were in our 20s, we were sure probably of two things. One is that nothing could harm us, that we would never die, and that we knew everything we needed to know.
How about our parents were stupid?
Yeah, well, that's the same thing.
Oh.
That's all part of that same trend. And our culture doesn't value experience very much.
Your parents learn an awful lot while you're away.
get rid of for parents, it's to get rid of the kids. For kids, it's to get rid of the
Very
parents.
expensive spiritual stuff.
But isn't that a transition? And maybe, just maybe, it's those transition experiences that lead us, number one, to learn things, no matter which end of it we're on. Our grandkids were over yesterday, and I learned just how much I like it when they come to visit, and more importantly, how much I value the quiet when they're not there. So you learn in the strangest places. But I think we learn from both ends. We learn when the kids go away to college, how much we want them to stay gone. I mean, how much we value them.
How about the spirit of play?
What I meant
The
was
kids.
that when you come back from college, your parents seem to have learned a lot.
Yes. And despite the fact that we know while our kids were at college, we probably weren't enrolled in any courses. It's a change in perspective. But we can also adopt things, I think, that disqualify people unfairly from being mentors. One of the things that does it in our culture is age. When you get too old looking or acting, all of a sudden, we don't want to hear from people the way we used to. As I looked at these readings beforehand, some things that occurred to me as I sat here earlier were, have we become less than wise about the people from whom we seek wisdom? Have we equated wisdom with financial success? Which is, to be sure, a kind of wisdom. But do people listen to Bill Gates, just to pick a random example, I've got nothing against Bill Gates, but do people listen to Bill Gates because he founded Microsoft and made a lot of money at it? Or do they listen to him because he dropped out of college?
Well, so did Walker.
But I mean,
I know.
if Bill Gates hadn't made a lot of money and stood before you and said, I dropped out of college, would we be thinking, here's a guy who can tell us a lot? I don't think so. And yet his life experience, suppose Microsoft was a successful company, but not nearly as successful as it was. And suppose Bill Gates overcame the odds to build Microsoft to a mid-level company. I don't think many people would want to hear from him.
We might not even know who he was.
No, probably not. Even if he did proportionately as much charitable work as he does now, I don't think we'd want to hear from him. That first reading, SDI is Spiritual Directors International. And the reason I really liked it is because it reflects my ambivalence about tradition. It calls us back to tradition in some ways, certainly in the people that it named. It calls us back to this idea that there's wisdom in people that have gone before. Even if they've gone way before, even if their life circumstances, because they went way before, were significantly different from ours. The fact that they were probably harder. I mean, let's face it, you didn't drive your car to wherever you were going 300 years ago. Healthcare was non-existent. And there was still this case where people were seen to have acquired wisdom through life experience. But you go back to Jesus, and here's this guy who's about 30 years old, give or take, showing up and saying, follow me. I think that on one hand, it was probably not that simple. They probably had some idea of who this guy was before. But if it was, then I think there's something about that feeling we get when we're around somebody who knows what they're doing. If you think back to even when you were in school, you had people who taught classes who clearly knew what they were doing and who earned your respect and clearly had done something in the field. And so you said, yeah, this person has something to teach me. And then there were other people who were just as clearly going through the motions, pretty burnt out, maybe had been pretty good at one point in time, but now were so crispy, you knew they were counting the years until retirement. And so you knew they didn't have that much to tell you. I think at one point, when people weren't carrying around resumes and CVs and a list of the works they had published, people had to rely more on their own ability to discern. Does this person have something to offer me or not? And when they did that, they weren't afraid to hear what that person had to say and consider it. Now, I doubt, given the value in Jewish culture of caring for your parents and respecting your parents, that you would really have abandoned your father in his ship, ruined the family business because some clown just came over the hill and seemed pretty appealing and you liked his sandals. So there had to be more than that. But I think there was this self-reliance. And I think part of the reason that people are reluctant today, young people especially, to be mentored, is they don't trust their own ability to evaluate, does this person have something to say to me? And let's face it, in the generations over the last 30 and 40 years, there have been an astonishing lack of people willing to serve as mentors. It's a two-way street. Some of us never get from the place where we're still trying to achieve, and that's all that we can devote our energy to the place where we're willing to share what we've learned. And you see holes in the culture around that. People who still think they can make their first million when they're 85 years old are not probably going to take the time to share what they've learned along the way with younger folks. And I think we need to return to that probably now more than ever, in a culture that seems to have lost its roots, in a culture that's filled with violence. How can we be authentic mentors? And I think there's more to it than just signing people up and deciding that they're qualified. But it may be the biggest task that's in front of us as we move ahead into the future.